Hey everybody, welcome back to Malts and Meeples. I'm Petter, and today we're doing, my top 10 games of 2024. I really hope I didn't mess up my slideshow. I did not. We're going to start out here with game number 10. Game number 10 is Dungeon Kart. Dungeon Kart is going to be a Mario Kart style racing game with the characters of Brotherwise Games' Boss Monster. So the Boss Monsters are out there racing, and each boss kind of has a unique power, as well as then each, like, the vehicle that they have has some special ability you can do something with. I really appreciate that element of it because it means everybody's not the same to start. Then you're just trying to do as fast a circuit of the track as you can. But if you're falling behind because maybe you're blocked out of a line or something that you would want to get through, well, no problem. Further behind you are, the better spells you can get. And those spells mess with the people ahead of you. This is meant to be a Mario Kart board game, and I think it does a good job with that. The getting in the way of each other works well, and it could feel like a lot of take that if it wasn't for the fact the game's just so fast. This is a really quick, fun racing game for when you want something that's a little bit lighter, maybe a little bit goofier. At number 9, we're going to have Snowfall Over Mountains. Now, this one is from Pencil First Game, and Pencil First Games almost always has amazing artwork to it, and this one is no exception to it. This is a little solo game where you are building out kind of the snowfall, the snowfall in the mountains around your cabin. And around that cabin, you're going to have different elements, basically like trees, shrubs, paths, bear tracks, and rabbit tracks, I believe, are the 5 of them. And they all score differently. In fact, there are multiple scoring cards for each one. And you play with one scoring card for each one of them. So you're trying to figure out the ideal, optimal scoring setup based off of the cards that you're playing out and kind of the order that you're drawing these little cards to be able to put them into your tableau. It's a fun game. It's a very relaxing game too, which I like. For a small solo game, this one, it's a little bit bigger in terms of the footprint of everything you have, but gameplay is that streamlined, easy to get to the table that works well for me for solo games. And it's one with a theme. Obviously with the holidays, I'm wearing short sleeves now, but I'm in Minnesota. It gets cold, it gets snowy. We're expected to have 3 to 7 inches of snow just tomorrow. So a good kind of cozy feeling winter theme is something that I really appreciate for the game as well. My number 8 is going to be Star Wars Unlimited, and I was so tempted to have this one higher on the list. There's just a lot of really fun games this year, but I love Star Wars Unlimited. It is my trading card game of choice. First, Star Wars, great theme for it, and you have natural kind of synergies and things that you can build into it. Right now, the most recent set had clones and droids. Those were the big synergies they built off of. First one, it was Rebels and Empire, but there were also Force users and all sorts of different things. We had bounty hunters and Mandalorians. So there's something for everybody in there if you like Star Wars. And then if you don't like Star Wars, there is still really good gameplay to this. There are a couple elements that stand out to me that I really appreciate. The first being that you're never mana screwed. And so if you're familiar with Magic the Gathering, you know it's possible that you're just not going to draw the lands that you need. You have a big deck of cards, 100 cards, and if you're playing Commander, and sure, you have a good percentage of those cards that are lands, but if the shuffle just happens to go wrong, you're screwed. Like, the game's over before it starts. Star Wars Unlimited, you don't have that problem because there are no lands. Instead, you are drawing a hand of cards and then you put them some face down. You can do two at the start, or you do two at the start of the game, and then you can do one each turn after that if you want. You don't have to do that. But those are cards that you could have played instead. I know they added, I think it was a saboteur or a smuggler mechanic. I was going to say saboteur, but smuggler mechanic in the Bounty Hunter Mandalorian set. So the second set that they came out with. And that one allowed you to put cards down there and eventually be able to play them for more later if you wanted. But that decision space of, do I want to keep this card for my hand, or do I want to trash it so I can play some other cards right now, hope I draw into another copy of that? It's great. I also really like how fast it is back and forth, because on my turn I do one thing. I can attack with somebody, I can activate an ability, I can play a card. I'm sure there's probably something I'm missing in there, but it's always that one thing. I do one thing, you do one thing, I do one thing, you do one thing. I guess the two other things that I didn't mention, I can take initiative. What that means is I pass, but then at the start of our next hand, because we'll both draw cards simultaneously, I get to go first. I lead the initiative. Or I can just pass. If let's say you've already grabbed the initiative, I can just say I pass. I'm done. That ends the round. It's barely an action. It's basically saying I end the round. And I really like that back and forth because there is strategy to, okay, I think I need to grab the initiative here so that I can take out some of my enemy's troops first. Then there's other things, and I really want to talk about this one more, so I'm going to. There are other things about it too that I really like. First off, you always have a leader. So it's kind of like in Magic the Gathering with a commander, you always have a unique kind of card, a unique leader for it. And that leader has an ability that you can use every turn. And then once you get enough lands, well, then you can put your leader into play. And they're really strong and they keep that ability. So that gives you a nice, like, focus immediately when you start deck building. And then, oh, the other thing that I really like about this is, okay, I might have a character that has Sentinel. Sentinel basically means that if you attack me with a ground troop, you have to attack that troop first, assuming it's a ground troop. Okay, remember another thing as well I want to talk about. But if you don't have that, or I don't have that, you can decide, okay, I want to attack your troop, or I want to attack your base. I don't declare defenders. I don't do anything of that. The game keeps it simple while still being really strategic in what you're doing and how you're playing the game. And the final thing I want to mention about this, because I have talked about it for a little bit, I'm going to take a sip of my old fashioned, is that you have two theaters that you fight in. You have ground and you have space. I don't know. Well, there's minor interactions in between the two, generally kind of in the passive way of, okay, somebody on in ground buffs all rebels. Okay, well, our rebel ships still get buffed as well. But I can't attack from space to your ground troops, and vice versa. My guess is they're going to introduce stuff like that. They might have already even introduced a few things that break that rule, But for the most part, my ground stuff attacks your ground stuff, my space stuff attacks your space stuff, and both of them can hit the base. So it's just to see who can take out that base fastest, and you can choose to overload space or overload ground troops and just try and outrace your opponent if they're going with a more balanced strategy. That was my number 8. I talked about that for a while. How long am I going to talk about the rest of these? Wait, was that my number 8? Dungeon Cart. Okay, now I gotta see. Yes. So we had Dungeon Cart at number 10. Snowfall Over Mountains at number 9. Star Wars Unlimited at number 8. My number 7 is going to be Lord of the Rings Duel for Middle Earth. This game is going to be in the top 100 games on Board Game Geek. I would guess latest end of Q1 2025. This is Seven Wonders Duel, but with a Lord of the Rings theme on it. And I think there's a few things that it does that I kind of like even better. First off, there are no points in this game. There's 3 different ways to win. You either get your military victory, for lack of a better term, which is actually, it's not really military. It's more, you have the Nazgul chasing down the ring bearer, and you have the ring bearer racing to the mountain. So those use the same cards, kind of that military style card, and it is this awesome sliding track. Then you have the different races of Middle Earth, and if somebody can have, I believe is it all 6? Or all 5 or all 6? I think all 6. And there's technically 7. There's one that you can sneak out in one way. If you have a token for all 6, you win the game. Then there's this board that is Middle Earth that you're kind of doing an area control battle on. And as long as you have one piece, whether it's a troop or a tower, on every spot on that board, you win. Now, it's possible by the time you finish up drafting, none of those conditions have been met. That is the one thing that keeps this game from probably being like my number 2 or 3 of the year. The kind of the final scoring, if none of the end kind of win conditions are hit, is whoever controls most of the board at the end of the game. Now, that works well. You need something to do with that. I'd like it to be a combination of all 3, so that as a player I can be, okay, I don't have to age 3 if it looks like, or kind of, draft round 3, if it looks like it's all going to come down to that final board. Like, nobody's in position to win based off of the races in Middle Earth. Nobody's in position to win based off of the ring catching it or destroying it. Then it just comes down to getting as many troops as you can on that board. That's fine, but I'd like to offer that strategy of you need to do well on all of them, and it figures it out, basically a score, I guess, across all 3. But in terms of a drafting game, it's a ton of fun. It's surprisingly kind of thematic with great artwork to it, and just a really good back and forth 2-player experience with not much in the way of asymmetry. But if you're familiar with Seven Wonders Duel, you know that as you draft, your strategies are kind of unfold for what you want to be doing, and you have to keep an eye on what your opponent's doing, because sometimes you're like, okay, you're getting way too close to catching the ring bearer or to throwing the ring into Mount Doom, so I need to start drafting those cards to stop you from being able to do it. So this was 7. My number 6 is going to be Castle Combo, another small box game. This one is a game about building a 3x3 grid. Very simple in what you are doing, but you are purchasing cards and placing them in a spot in your 3x3 grid. Now, each of those cards has a cost to it. It has an immediate benefit that you're going to get. It might be a permanent reduction on the cost of different cards, or it might be a get you a bunch of money or a bunch of keys that you can use to get purchase cards with money, or manipulate where you can buy cards or what cards you can buy with keys. And then an end game scoring. That end game scoring might be like, okay, however many blue shields you have in this column, they're all worth 3 apiece. Gives you a strategy to try and figure that out, but you have to figure out how to score well on all 9 of them if you can, because that's going to be how you get the most points. Like, you don't want something to score you 0 points if you can help it. So I really enjoy the simplicity and quickness of this game while still giving you a good depth in strategy. And I mentioned the keys too. So one of the elements of the game is the keys, because there's 2 different rows, kind of the serfs and the royalty, and there's a messenger that moves up and down between the 2. Whichever the messenger is at, that's where you have to purchase from. Now, you can spend 1 key to move that messenger to the other spot, or you can spend 1 key to wipe all of whoever is at your location and then flip out 3 new ones to purchase from. But you can't do both. So it's this tough decision of looking at it, like, well, there's a card down in the serfs that could score me points. Well, will score me points. But if I wipe this top section, I might find something that scores me more. Do I risk that? Because I might also find me something that doesn't score me anything at all. So it's a nice little question that the game asks, just to add that little bit of a tweak to it. Number 5 is going to be Let's Go to Japan. This one, well, you can kind of see a few games here that weren't in my top 100 games of all time, like Let's Go to Japan, Castle Combo, Lord of the Rings, Duel for Middle-earth, because I played them after I wrote up that list. But Let's Go to Japan is a really fun experience of a game of planning out your vacation through Japan. And each day you have something specific that, like, you get a little bit of a benefit if you match up the type of thing that you're doing on that day. It might be like, okay, go to garden or nature on Monday, and then food stuff on Tuesday. On Wednesday, just make sure you relax a lot. And you're collecting symbols kind of in a set collection, but then those symbols also activate endgame scoring triggers, and you go in order through your week. So you have to think about, I need these symbols to score this card on Monday, let's say, or Tuesday. Let's say on Tuesday. I can't put them after Tuesday. They have to either be on Monday or on Tuesday, because if I haven't built up enough, say, food by the end of day on Tuesday, I'm not going to score those bonus points. Doesn't matter if I get a whole bunch of food afterwards, because I won't have eaten it by Tuesday. So it basically is looking at your previous experiences. And it has a fun way of drafting, too, where you start out with a hand of 2 cards. You pick one of the 2 cards, either a Tokyo card or a Kyoto card. And you place it on your kind of week itinerary. And then you pass the other card to the person to your left or person to your right, depending on which way you're passing in the moment. 2-player game, it's a moot point. But that person doesn't like add it to a hand or anything to draft from, or they aren't forced to put that down. You'll play out 4 cards and pass 4 cards, so that then your opponent, after kind of round 4 of playing out cards, they're going to pick up all 4 of those cards you pass them, and they're going to play out 2 of them. So there's this little bit of strategy that's fun with it. And I mean, artwork in this game is great. Bits and pieces in this game, just phenomenal. Ease of play is really good once you get into it. Like, once you understand the basics of it, it works so well. And I can't imagine that AEG isn't. So, I can't imagine that they are going to make a whole lot more of these games, because why wouldn't we get a let's go to Australia, or let's go to Italy, let's go to France, let's go to California, whatever it might be, because it will work in any of those settings. I think they did a really good job by picking Japan first. I mean, it probably was intentionally made for that, but with anime having its, huge moment right now, it has been for years, and just kind of, there's a lot of that culture that is visible within the United States now, and I think visible throughout the world to some extent as well. I can't speak for the rest of the world. I can speak for the United States. I definitely see it. So it is something, it's a location that people will be excited for. Then my number 4 is going to be Mistborn, the deck building game. Honestly, this one could go higher. I love it for the theme. I love deck building in general. And this one, I played here on Malts and Meeples. You can see a solo playthrough and how that goes. But there are so many things that I just really enjoy about this game, and a few things that I think make it unique for a deck building game. Because there are a ton of deck building games out there already. The first is this idea of the metals. So if you're not familiar with Mistborn, the characters, the Mistborn in the story, can burn metal. And by burning metal, it allows them to do certain things. Like on the cover, Vin, the character there, is pushing against coins and basically shooting them out with force. She can push against metal object if she burns the right type of metal. She can also pull stuff to her if she burns to the right type of metal, or strengthen herself. That one's burning pewter. So a lot of just really kind of fun thematic things that they do with that. But then also, you burn metal, so you have to spend resources. You're spending your metal, and every good Mistborn has plenty of metal on them, so you're never going to run out. But you can't burn it all at once. You can't burn all however many types of metal it is. Forget if it's, I think it's 10 different types of metal immediately, because if you do that, it might be 8. It's kind of a moot point, because you just don't have that ability, that control. So you have to pick and choose which one you burn. And some of the cards require you to burn metal, some of them don't. I mean, the ones that don't just give you a little bit of money to buy more cards. But then the other thing I really like is that it has a leveling track. And the leveling track just has you leveling at the start of every turn. And some turns you level up and you don't get anything, but pretty quickly you're able to burn now 2 metals, then 3 metals, then you get adium, which is kind of a wild metal resource that you can use. And it works well, and it ramps the game in a great way. You start to unlock special abilities for your characters, and yeah, it's just a lot of fun. The solo/cooperative version works well. I enjoy the multiplayer version. Thematically, that doesn't fit as well. Having the different Mistborn battle each other, just based off of some of the characters, they wouldn't necessarily do that in the book, though, as a training exercise. If you're like, well, this is just a training exercise, sure, but it's fun. I like the targeting system too. It's something I didn't mention. So you can win by a couple different ways in the competitive version. You can win by making it to the top of 3 kind of research tracks or adventure tracks where you're trying to infiltrate different locations or deal with different locations. Basically, there's one resource that you can get that moves you up those tracks, or one symbol on the cards, I should say, that moves you up those tracks. But the other way is you can knock out all your opponents. And to do that, you have to be able to attack them. And to attack them, you play out cards with attack. But you can't just pick who you attack, because that would kind of be annoying to be like, well, everybody attacks Petter. Because if everybody attacks Petter, Petter gets knocked out. It makes it easier to win because now there's only one person, or one less person, and just everybody ganging up on one person until the first person who's been knocked out gets bored and leaves because they've been sitting there for 45 minutes. Instead, what the game offers you is this target, and you have to attack the person who has the target. When the person who has the target is attacked, they take the damage, and they have a choice. They can either keep the target, or they can pass it to the next person. And not to the next person, to a person. They get to choose who they want to pass it to. If they decide to pass it, well, it just moves, and now that person's the target. But if they decide to keep it, and it makes it to their turn, with them still having it, they're still alive, they can then attack, and when they attack everybody. So it kind of has that King of Tokyo push your luck feel. How much damage can I take before I have to say, nope, I have to pass this off to somebody else because I want to be able to hit everybody at once instead of doing such a particular target. Next up at number 3 here we have Rebel Princess. Rebel Princess is Hearts. It is the game of Hearts. Except it has a fun theme to it versus a deck of playing cards where you will play as princesses who are trying to avoid the proposals of the princes who have snuck into the ball, including the Queen of Spades. By Queen of Spades, I mean the Frog Prince, who kind of works in the same way. It's more points that you want to avoid. But this game has elements to it that just make it a lot of silly, good fun. Each player has a princess they're playing as, and that princess has a power. That power you can use one time per hand. So not per trick, but per hand. And all of those powers feel game-breaking. Some of them do feel a little bit better than the others, but I think that might come down more to how people tend to play the game and tend to work with their hand. Beyond that, there's a unique rule for each hand. That rule also gives you kind of the rules for how you pass cards, either left, right, or I think it's just left or right. It's never across. But it might be you pass one card each direction. So that's a twist. And like I said, there are rules. The example that is easiest for me to remember is that one of the rules could be, and it would just be for that hand, whoever is furthest in the suit played out or in the trump suit away from the card numerically that was led, that's what wins. So if I play out a 7 and somebody plays out a 1, another person plays out a 10, even though the 10's a bigger number, that 1 is going to be what takes the trick. And I really enjoy that. And the card that you use, or one of the cards that you use for the last round, because there are multiple of them you can choose from, those tend to offer even bigger things like extra points. And you still have the ability to shoot the moon like you do in Hearts as well. It's just, I think it's less powerful in a lot of ways than shooting the moon regularly. So I appreciate that. I have a helicopter, it sounds like, flying overhead. My number 2 was on the top 100 of all time, 2024 edition, Slay the Spire. I really enjoyed this as a board game. And I will say, oddly enough, I do think it is better as a multiplayer game than it is as a solo game. So this is an adaptation, board game adaptation of the video game Slay the Spire. The video game of Slay the Spire is one of my favorite video games of all time. I should actually do like a top 20 video games. I can maybe do a top 50. We'll have to see. But this is just a climb up the tower, climb up the spire, fight bosses, fight regular bad guys, elite, shop, get other bonuses, and after every fight you do, you get a choice of cards to add to your deck. And I mean, if you're playing solo, it's super similar. Now, there are a few differences for it to kind of randomize a little bit what the bad guys are going to do, though some of them still do fall nicely into kind of an order. You roll a die, and that die roll determines what the bad guys are going to do, but all of them are going to do, but it also determines what relics activate. And there's a few other things, but one other thing that I think is important to call out here is that it scales hit points a lot. So you're never going to be like, okay, I have 70 hit points, or this attack deals 28 damage, and then I attack again for another 9 damage. It makes it all smaller. It makes it so that it keeps the math easy, which I really like. And then the final thing I really want to talk about with this one is the fact that you can play multiplayer. And in multiplayer, each player gets a row of baddies. That row, your row, is going to hit you. So you have to be aware of that. But as a player, you don't have to hit your row. You can hit one of your allies' rows. Say they're going to get slammed with that first attack. You all team up on that row, clear out as much as you can. Hopefully you can clear it all out if you're lucky. And then they don't get hit. Everybody else gets pinged for a little bit. And now they don't have to worry about anything on their row. They just figure out, okay, who needs my help, and jumps in and helps that way. And you still have the Ironclad, the Silent, the Watcher, and the Defect to play as, so you still have those same characters that you know and love from the video game. And then finally, my number 1 was very high in my top 100 games of all time. I think both the last 2 were top 10 for me for all time. The Seventh Citadel. Seventh Citadel is the follow-up game to the Seventh Continent. In this one, though, instead of just having this curse that you're trying to search for an answer, there's kind of this apocalyptic world where there are these druidic necromancers, I forget what they call them, these different monsters, and everybody's kind of been trapped away and living in these citadels. Well, something has changed. There's a threat out there that has caused the citadels to break, and there are different threats that you can play against in this game, which is a lot of fun. But each of those threats is going to have you going through different scenarios. And the scenarios, they don't tell you, so you still get the sense of exploration that you got from Seventh Continent. But instead of wandering aimlessly, the the scenarios, they tell you, don't tell you where something is, but they tell you what direction it is, and they give you a map. I love this. They give you a map, and you're like, okay, I can. They're saying that it's near this. I'm gonna have to head off in this direction, in this pathway, and figure out what's going on. And it's just fun, and you still have that card health system ish. I say ish because you have separate hit points, but you have this deck of cards that you are committing certain number of cards. Oftentimes you can choose how many you want, sometimes you're limited, and you're looking to complete and get a certain number of stars to see if you succeed or not. So you can burn a lot of cards fast, but you go through that deck, you then have to spend hit points. One hit point gets you, I believe it's 2 cards back. And so if you have a deck of whatever it is, 2 players, I think it's 20 something cards, 26 maybe. Yeah, that's a lot of hit points to get all of them back. That's 13 hit points if you had every single card discarded. And so you're spending your own life to get cards back, to be able to do more. And it's this balancing act of how much do I want to spend in terms of cards to try and get this success. Like, it's important to me that I get this success, but is it worth the potential cost of life that I'm going to have to spend later to get them back? And I've really enjoyed the story elements to the game. This is another one that I played here on Malts and Meeples. In fact, this one and Slay the Spire, the board game and the video game for that one. And both of them just work well. I had planned on doing more Seventh Citadel, streaming it, but I found that as I was playing, and some of this is on me, I know that I've started to kind of figure out that with these big story adventure type games, and especially if it's a well-written story, I really want to share it with other people. And so with the Seventh Citadel, I was like, okay, now that I've gotten a ways into it and I feel comfortable, I know what's going on, I've showcased it well on the channel, I could say I'm going to set it aside. But I do want to get back to it. I really want to play it again, find one other person, maybe 2 other people to play it with, and just enjoy and explore the world and kind of all the craziness that they create in this world, because there is a lot to it. But with that, those are my, 10 through 1. You can check out over on nerdologist.com my article of my 20 through 11. And I guarantee you that I've missed games and played games since I created that list. So there's probably stuff that would have been higher, because honestly, I'm not that big a fan of my number 20. That said, a lot of great games this year have come out. I can see games on my shelf. I don't think I had played Charcuterie, for example. Maybe by the time that I made the list. I haven't played Stamp Swap yet. Wow, I just realized I completely left off Rock Hard 1972. So somehow that was completely blanked on by me. Yeah, there's way too many good games that came out this year, much like every year. So let me know your favorite games from 2024 down in the comment section below. I'm going to throw in an honorable mention to Rock Hard 1977. Not 72, 77. Worker placement game about being a rock star. It is just a blast. Very thematic experience of a game. So I'm not going to spend much more time on it than that, because this has already been 40 minutes and I don't have a slide for it. but a great game as well. Definitely should have been in my top 10. I can see it there on the shelf, and it's going to be bugging me that I forgot about it. But like I said, let me know your favorite down in the comment section below. And if you enjoy this content, please give the video a thumbs up. Check out the articles over on nerdologist.com if you're curious on some of the games that I mentioned here. I think I called out all of them that I have a solo playthrough here on the channel, so you can look for them here on Malts and Meeples, or check out just other games that you can play solo as well. And if you want to know when I go live, like the gaming stuff that is coming up, around the holidays it's going to be hit or miss, so probably no streaming next week. But on Fridays generally at 9 p.m. Central Time, my wife and I stream Baldur's Gate 3. Monday around 8 p.m. Central, I play a solo board game, though this past Monday it was wrapping up my 150 to 101 to just kind of talk about the games that just missed that top 100 list that I talked about. And then on Wednesdays, 9 p.m. Central, I do videos, generally small solo game playthroughs, lists like this one. Wednesdays are when I do my top 100 games as well. So that's a lot to remember. The easier way to remember is to just subscribe and click that notification bell. That will let you know whenever I go live. And finally, I want to mention that I also have a podcast about Marvel called 10 Minute Marvel. You can find that here on YouTube, or search 10 Minute Marvel wherever you get your friendly neighborhood podcast from. But with that, bottoms up.